Here's the latest on Iran. First up, the War Powers Resolution was passed in 1973. It's also called the War Powers Act. It is a federal law passed by Congress, and it says the president must consult with Congress before introducing armed forces into combat. If you're going to phone in an airstrike, you have to consult Congress. Congress was not consulted, certainly not the Democrats. I'm going to talk about this in a second. He must notify Congress within 48 hours before he deploys troops into hostile situations. That's the law. That's the War Powers Act. And Congress can prevent an airstrike before it happens by passing a War Powers resolution forbidding the president from striking. It almost happened when Obama was president. He was about to bomb Syria because they were accused of using, I think it was nerve gas. I think it was sarin, I'm not sure. And Obama was about to bomb Syria. Congress blocked it. I don't think through an official invocation of the War Powers Act, but a threat to invoke the War Powers Act. So there's something very disingenuous going on right now in the Democratic Party because Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, and Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, are now criticizing Trump's bombing campaign over Iran, and they're saying, we're going to invoke the War Powers Act. We want answers. Well, Tim Kaine, the senator from Virginia, introduced a War Powers resolution last week to block Donald Trump from bombing Iran. Republican Tom Massey of Kentucky and Democrat from California, Ro Khanna, together introduced a War Powers resolution blocking the attacks last week. There was legislation last week sitting in the House and the Senate calling on Donald Trump not to attack Iran and forcing a vote, forcing Republicans to say, yes, we're in favor of this. But Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries let those resolutions die. And now, after the bombing campaign, the Democrats are saying, we need answers. We need to invoke the War Powers resolution. You had the power, Democrats, last week to at least force Republicans to debate the bombing campaign and be on record for it. And now the best that we can hope for in Iran is we go back to the treaty that Obama signed in 2015 with Iran. After all the dust settles, hopefully it won't be radioactive, we're going to end up, if we're lucky, with the same exact treaty that Barack Obama signed with Iran in 2015. Donald Trump pulled out of it. In 2018, Joe Biden ran for president, claiming he'd go back into the treaty with Iran. He didn't because Benjamin Netanyahu always wanted a war with Iran. And Joe Biden, like Donald Trump, afraid, terrified of Benjamin Netanyahu. This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you so much for finding me. Operation Midnight Hammer is what the Pentagon calls Saturday's airstrikes on 3 nuclear facilities in Iran. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres calling the American airstrikes, quote, a dangerous escalation in a region already on the edge and a direct threat to international peace and security. Little word of advice, always listen to United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Whatever he says is correct. He's like Ralph Nader or Bernie Sanders. Always listen. If Guterres says something, it's correct. He knows what's best. He really does. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi met with European leaders in Switzerland on Friday, hoping to find some diplomatic resolution before the American strikes. He is now reportedly off to Moscow to meet with Iran's military ally, Russian leader Vladimir Putin, and now there's talk that Russia may be providing Iran with, perhaps, let's just say, nuclear technology. Diplomacy was happening. Gideon Sa'ar, Israel's foreign secretary, saying diplomacy with Iran, however, was impossible. That's what Israel was saying. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi on Sunday said there's no reason diplomacy can't work, adding he believed it was possible to return to the 2015 nuclear deal that Iran struck with the Obama administration. Yes, as I said, it was a deal Trump pulled out of in 2018. Joe Biden promised to restore that treaty, but never got around to it. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, also serving as Trump's national security advisor, claimed Sunday that before Saturday's American airstrikes, Trump offered a deal to Iran, saying, "We won't bomb you if you agree to only use your uranium for civilian purposes." You mean the deal Obama had back in 2015, the one that Trump pulled out of, that deal? Rubio insisted he made that offer, but never heard back from Iran. Rubio is also a liar. 6 American B-2 stealth bombers dropped 14 bunker busters, each weighing 30,000 pounds, on the Fordo nuclear facility. That's Iran's most sophisticated, with uranium reportedly enriched over there up to 60%. It also reportedly has 3,000 centrifuges. Now, remember, once uranium reaches 90% purification, it's considered weapons grade. 2 bunker busters were dropped on Natanz, reportedly Iran's largest but not most sophisticated nuclear enrichment facility. Fordo is the most sophisticated. Natanz is the largest. They have nuclear centrifuges there that are assembled for the other facilities, and there's also some uranium there that has been enriched up to 60%. Isfahan, where Iran was also said to be enriching uranium, was struck by 30 Tomahawk missiles fired by American submarines. The United States is the only military power with these bunker busters, and Saturday's air campaign is the first time they were ever used. After the strikes, Iran's own nuclear inspectors saying there have been no signs of contamination at the nuclear sites inside Isfahan, Fordo, and Natanz. UN inspectors also saying there is no evidence of any radiation that has spread after the strikes. So what does that suggest? Possibly the enriched uranium had already been moved out of the facilities before Saturday. It pretty much means there was no uranium in those facilities. The Pentagon reporting that in order to divert attention away from Saturday's mission, they flew decoy B-2 stealth bombers over the Pacific. Decoy stealth bombers. They're stealth bombers, which means nobody can see them. Why do you need decoys for stealth bombers? If you need decoys, they're not stealth. These things run, by the way, $2 billion each. Each stealth bomber, $2 billion each, and it costs $130,000 an hour to keep each one up in the air. Plus, you need decoys because they're not really stealth. Spending all this money, but if you're a single mom with a teenage kid, you have to work for Medicaid and food stamps. With Vice President J.D. Vance, National Security Advisor, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth by his side, a somewhat gleeful Donald Trump went on television Saturday night to declare Iran's nuclear facilities had been, quote, completely and totally obliterated. Trump called the bombing mission a complete success and accused Iran of being the world's #1 leader of state-sponsored terrorism. During Sunday's press conference. They had an early morning Sunday press conference. On Sunday, Defense Chief Pete Hegseth, this time drunk with power and alcohol, Pete Hegseth said the purpose of the attack was not regime change in Iran. He told reporters, this mission has not been about regime change. But since Israel's attacks began on June 13th, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly called upon the Iranian people to rise up against their leaders. The supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, is said to be in hiding and has remained silent for fear any communication would make him an easy target for Israeli and now American missile strikes. Iran's supreme leader, Khamenei, has also reportedly appointed 3 clerics as his successors if he becomes one of the several dozen top Iranian commanders and scientists assassinated by the Israeli military in the past 9 days. Foreign Affairs magazine on Saturday repeating what I've been reminding listeners of for years, and that is bombing campaigns rarely, if ever, result in regime change. Assassinating foreign leaders also rarely, if ever, results in regime change. Foreign Affairs citing Israel's constant pounding of Hezbollah and Hamas, the assassinations of their leaders, who've all been eliminated and yet all replaced within their organizations. Organizations now weakened, but still in place. A spokesperson for the Speaker of Iran's parliament saying key ingredients inside the Fordo nuclear plant were successfully evacuated before the American airstrikes. Well, of course they were. He added what many senior Iranian officials have been saying for weeks, and that is Israeli bombs and American bombs can't destroy knowledge. Therefore, the airstrikes cannot reverse Iran's nuclear program. It was generally agreed inside the American intelligence community that before the United States got involved Saturday night, the Israeli airstrikes might have set Iran's nuclear program back by about 6 months. Now, some are saying Saturday night's American airstrikes could have set the program back by as many as 3 years. But Israel's foreign minister, Gideon Saar, said over the weekend that Israel's bombing campaign, without the United States jumping in, had already delayed Iran's program by at least 2 or 3 years. We were told before Trump launched the missiles that Iran's nuclear program was set back by about 6 months by Israel's airstrikes, and we needed the bunker busters. Israel needed the bunker busters. Only America had bunker busters. And now after we use the bunker busters, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar is saying, we already set them back at least 2 or 3 years. So why did Trump launch the bombing raid? To test these never-before-deployed bunker busters, to demonstrate to the world his willingness to use America's military, as long as it's not his own kids, to overcompensate for sexual dysfunction inside the Republican Party and his own pants. Never underestimate the satisfaction men like this get, sexually dysfunctional misogynists get, dropping bombs. Why else did Trump do this? To get on board Israel's seemingly successful bombing campaign that he was against at first, but after a couple of days, it looked like it was going to be successful, whatever successful means, and he wanted in so he could talk tough, just like Benjamin Netanyahu. That's the reason he did this. Hasn't put an end, I assure you, has not put an end to Iran's civilian nuclear program. And if they decide to have a nuclear bomb, it's not putting an end to that either. All this is going to do, if we're lucky, is bring us back to the treaty that Obama signed with Iran in 2015. Senate Majority Leader, Republican John Thune, praised the airstrike, saying he hoped they would finally result in Iran coming to the bargaining table. You effing liar. Iran already was at the bargaining table. You see that? That's them all having dinner Friday in Switzerland. Iran's foreign minister met with European leaders in Switzerland Friday. Throughout the Israeli air campaign, Iranian foreign minister was in constant contact with Steve Witkoff, Trump's press envoy. And negotiations between Iran and the United States were taking place right up until Israel launched their airstrikes. The sticking point between the United States and Iran before Israel launched the airstrikes was Trump insisted Iran give up its ambitions to build a nuclear bomb. You know, the treaty we signed in 2015, where they agreed to that? Iran insisted we don't have any ambitions to build a nuclear bomb. Check with your intelligence community, Iran said. They've all concluded, all 18 agencies that make up America's intelligence community concluded we gave up our nuclear bomb program more than 20 years ago. Check with Tulsi Gabbard, the Iranians said to Steve Witkoff. Check with them. And according to Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff, negotiations between Iran and the United States had hit a stalemate last month because we were insisting they give up all their nuclear bomb plans. And Iran said, we don't have them. How can we give up something we don't have? So it is an established fact among all parties that Iran did not have a nuclear bomb. However, for a country that does not have a nuclear bomb, Iran's uranium was the world's most enriched. No other non-nuclear power had purified its uranium up to 60%, which Iran had done. You got to get it up to 90%. Once you get it up to 90% purification, then you have enough for a bomb. But then you need to solve the triggering mechanism problem. You got to figure out how to trigger the bomb. But at 90%, without the triggering mechanism, Iran would have enough for what is called a dirty bomb. So how close was Iran to being able to produce weapons-grade material? It's agreed upon that the Israeli and now the U.S. bombing campaign rendered it impossible for UN officials to make any determinations now. Now we have no idea how close they are to making a nuclear bomb. Now we have no idea how to monitor their uranium because they removed it from the 3 sites that we dropped bunker busters on. So now the worry is Iran will be less likely to comply with UN inspectors. That generally happens when you start bombing. Iran is still a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which meant they promised never to become a nuclear power and had agreed to daily inspections at all their nuclear facilities. That's what the UN watchdog said at the beginning of June. That although they said the inspections have not been totally forthcoming, but they've agreed to open up all their nuclear facilities. They've been complying. They were slightly non-compliant. That's what the UN inspector said at the beginning of June. The UN inspector now says it's impossible for them to comply. We have no idea where the uranium is. Remember, Iran said it had evacuated their nuclear facilities in anticipation of Trump's airstrikes. I'm going to tell you something that's in a second that's your head's going to explode. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, said during Sunday morning's press conference that in order to pull off the bombing mission, the American military relied on surprise and subterfuge. Doesn't that sound good? Makes you feel like a man. We relied on surprise and subterfuge. It was a surprise attack on Iran. It sounds good, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Dan Kane, but you're a liar. You're a liar. Unless by surprise and subterfuge you mean not telling the Democrats or the American people about the attacks, because everyone else, including the Iranians, knew the attack was about to happen. Take your surprise and subterfuge and put it where the sun don't shine. I don't mean Boeing's headquarters in Seattle, where the sun never shines. Iran knew about it. You told them, you liar. You didn't tell the Democrats. You didn't tell the American people, you liar. You're a liar. You told Iran. Congressional Republicans were told early on Saturday of Trump's plan to attack, but Democrats kept completely in the dark, including ranking members of the Intelligence, Defense, and Foreign Affairs committees. Trump didn't even inform Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer or House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. They had no idea the attacks were about to take place. Now, before a president launches a missile strike, according to the War Powers Act, he is supposed to consult with Congress. It's generally assumed that means he's supposed to consult with what is called the Gang of Eight. What is the Gang of Eight? They are 4 Democrats in Congress and 4 Republicans in Congress. Who are the 4 Democrats Trump was supposed to consult? House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Mark Warner, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and Jim Himes, the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. They were not consulted. This is in direct violation of the War Powers Act. Everybody knew, except the Democrats and the American people. Britain knew, Israel knew, Republicans knew, even Iran knew, just not the Democrats or the American people. So I guess that is the subterfuge our lying chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was talking about. When he called it a surprise attack, he was surprising the American people and the Democrats, because he certainly wasn't surprising the Iranians. They got a heads up. They got a heads up. This should not surprise you. All war is a lie. You cannot fight wars without lying. So, if Iran knew, if Israel knew, what was the secret? Why couldn't the Democrats and the American people know we were about to attack? Better yet, why couldn't we debate it? Why couldn't we debate it? Iran was told. So I think the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, owes the American people an explanation for his flat-out lie when he claimed, when he peacocked and put his chest out and said the mission was carried out using surprise and subterfuge. Does that make you hard? Does it make you hard, General, when you get to use words like surprise and subterfuge? Everyone knew, the Iranians, Israel, Republicans, just not the American people. We never got to debate this. The Iranians knew the attack was going to happen because we told them. Before the United States launched its so-called surprise attack on Iran, we called Iran. They didn't even have to find out about it from Pete Hegseth, accidentally including them in a secret signal group chat with his wife and brothers. No, the United States told Iran. They said, hey, a little heads up. We're about to attack you by surprise. That's what happened. Because the Ayatollah is in his mid-80s, which is also why they no longer throw him surprise parties. His heart can't take it. It's a little special courtesy that the Trump administration offered up beforehand. Now, on the last show, I told you the days of surprise attacks are over. The United States contacted Iran before these airstrikes through back channels, probably, I'm hearing, through the nation of Oman. We conveyed to Oman to tell Iran the attacks on the 3 nuclear facilities are imminent, and please assure Iran's leadership this will be it. No more attacks. Okay? That's what we said. No more attacks. We probably said something like, don't take it personally, but look, we've never used the bunker busters in real life combat. We need to know if they work. You're our proving ground. Again, don't take it personally. Plus, Donald Trump, our imbecile leading us, he's failing on the tariffs. The economy is turning to crap. He promised to stop the fighting in Gaza and Ukraine on day 1. That's not happening. So he needs a win. He'll escalate the fighting in the Middle East. And again, Iran, don't take this personally, because Israel already did all the heavy lifting. Trump figures he'll grab some credit by slapping his name on their work. Satellite photos, I got to tell you, it's just so, I'm older than most of my listeners. I remember Iraq. Those who forget history are doomed to become Americans. Satellite photos released Sunday reveal convoys of trucks outside the bombed-out Iranian nuclear facilities, suggesting much of the nuclear material had already been removed before Trump's bombing campaign began. So now it seems Iran still has uranium that's been enriched up to 60%. They lack most of the centrifuges, which they can get from China or Russia now. And because of the attacks, we have no idea where their uranium is being hidden, so we can't check to see how purified it's becoming. Early in June, before the Israeli airstrikes began, UN weapons inspectors warned that while Iran was allowing inspectors in each day, they had become somewhat non-compliant. And the UN inspectors warned that Iran was weeks away from being able to build a nuclear bomb if it wanted to. This is the difference between Iraq, our illegal invasion of Iraq, and our illegal bombing of Iran. Trump and Cheney lied and said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Trump is saying they don't have weapons of mass destruction. We're not sure if they're ever going to have weapons of mass destruction. But Melania won't sleep with me, and I smell like a fart, so I need to bomb something. That's basically what it is. We have an impotent commander-in-chief who smells like a fart. So that was what we believed, that Iran was something 2 weeks away from getting a nuclear bomb if it wanted one. By the way, that ran counter to what Tulsi Gabbard, our director of national intelligence, was claiming. She told the president the entire U.S. intelligence community, made up of nearly 18 separate spy agencies, they all agreed that Iran was 3 years away from being able to produce a bomb. And that was before the Israeli airstrikes began. She also repeated what the United States intelligence community has been saying for more than a decade, and that is Iran ended its nuclear bomb program more than 20 years ago. But right before Trump launched his airstrikes on Saturday, Tulsi Gabbard announced she had changed her mind and said Iran was only weeks away from being able to produce a nuclear bomb. John Radcliffe, our CIA director, in the Situation Room, telling Trump as recently as Friday night, if you attack Iran, you're not going to take out their nuclear capabilities. You're going to create resolve so that they pivot and decide to become a nuclear power so they can enjoy the same protections North Korea has. And he said, our evidence shows, despite what the UN is saying, our evidence says they abandoned their nuclear bomb program 20 years ago. So why the campaign? Why the bombing campaign? To check out the bunker busters to see if they work. Impotent men who smell like farts, who want to take it out on women who won't sleep with them, so they need to see a missile-shaped object, some phallic symbol, explode, because theirs doesn't. And if you think I'm being glib, I'm not. This is what it's about. Sexual frustration. And Trump wanted to put numbers on the board, trying to look successful because he's a failure. So he has to piggyback onto Benjamin Netanyahu's. He loves the way Netanyahu talks and threatens. So I want to do some of that. What's the end result? Well, like I said, if we're lucky, we'll get back to the 2015 treaty that President Obama signed with the Iranians, if we're lucky. They're threatening retaliatory strikes. Putin plays chess and stayed out of this. Now, I don't know. He stayed out of it, but now there's talk he's ready to give them something in the way of nuclear technology. You know how we take credit for tricking the Russians into invading Afghanistan in the late 70s? Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, used to brag, I tricked the Russians into invading Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires, and because of that, the Soviet Union fell. That's what Zbigniew Brzezinski said. I tricked the Soviet Union into invading Afghanistan. That's why they fell. You'll notice throughout the lead-up, Putin, totally silent. I'll mediate. We can't do anything. Last week, Putin was saying, we offered air defenses to Iran. They turned it down. We can't do anything other than play chess and think 14 moves ahead. What happens now if Russia decides to make Iran a nuclear power? I don't think that's going to happen. But there's talk of that. White House officials calling Saturday's strikes a one-off. It always is. We're just going to drop these bombs, and then we're going to move on with our life. Right? Never leads to more chaos. Iran's parliament voted to close the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil passes. Closing the Strait of Hormuz is not a final decision made by the parliament. The final decision must be approved by Iran's supreme leader. With 2 U.S. aircraft carriers in that region and a third U.S. aircraft carrier on its way, if Iran attempts to choke off the Strait of Hormuz, considering what that would do to world oil prices, it's doubtful the United States wouldn't then engage with Iranian naval vessels attempting to mine this very strategic sea lane. During the height of Iran's war with Iraq back in 1988, Iran placed nearly 300 mines in the Strait of Hormuz, one of which nearly sank a U.S. warship. It got hit by one. So before the U.S. airstrikes, there appeared to be a split inside the Republican Party, with some MAGA isolationists accusing Donald Trump of reneging on his America First promises to keep America out of foreign wars so we could focus on our real enemies, other Americans. That's MAGA wants to fight an internal war. J.D. Vance, our vice president, is an America Firster. He opposed the air attacks on Yemen back in March, but he went along with them because he's actually more of a J.D. Vance Firster than he is an America Firster. On Sunday, after the attacks, J.D. Vance assured MAGA Republicans the attack on Iran wouldn't result in another long, drawn-out war in the Middle East. Speaking of George W. Bush's failed invasion of Iraq, Vance said, quote, "I understand your concern. Back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives." Apparently it's doing whatever Bibi Netanyahu says. Freshman Republican senator from Montana, Senator Tim Sheehy, said he opposed Trump bombing Fordo, warning that it wouldn't end Iran's nuclear bomb ambitions. But then after the airstrikes, he called it the right decision. Sheehy is a veteran from Iraq. He fought in Iraq, but he doesn't know if he got shot in Iraq or if he got shot when he dropped his gun on a camping trip in Montana. Hasn't quite figured that one out. Charlie Kirk, who runs Turning Points and is a prodigious MAGA Republican fundraiser, also warned against the airstrikes. But now, after Trump went ahead with them, Charlie Kirk calling it the right decision. So as expected, pushback inside the Republican Party is pretty muted. Ohio House Republican Warren Davidson, however, saying, quote, "It's hard to conceive a rationale that's constitutional." Yeah, it's not constitutional, and it's a violation of the War Powers Act. Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, said this is not constitutional. Republican Massie co-sponsored a resolution last week along with Democrat Ro Khanna to block military action in Iran without Congress first authorizing it. Republican Thomas Massie stated, after the strikes, he said there was no imminent threat to the United States. He said, even worse, Congress was on vacation when all this was happening. The House was on vacation. So what you had last week was, I'm going to repeat what I said at the top of the show, because Democrats, at least the Democratic leadership, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, last week could have endorsed the two War Powers resolutions, the one from Tim Kaine, Democrat, in the Senate, and the one in the House that Republican Tom Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna introduced to block Donald Trump from dropping bombs on Iran. Hakeem Jeffries, House Minority Leader, Senator Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, killed those bills, never brought them up for a vote, never talked about them. Now, ex post facto, they're going, this was in violation of the War Powers. You were in violation of the War Powers Act. It's your job to introduce legislation to block a president from dropping bombs before he does it. That's how the War Powers Act works. And the Democrats wonder, going into the midterms, why Republicans, congressional Republicans, have an 11% higher approval rating than congressional Democrats. But we're supposed to take back the Senate and the House of Representatives next year. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said Trump owes the American people an explanation and then calls for the War Powers Act to be invoked. Little late, Chucky. Where am I? Oh, Bernie. I'm all at it. Bernie Sanders calling Trump's attacks, quote, grossly unconstitutional. He added, only Congress has the authority to take the country to war. Bernie was saying it all last week. Of course, nobody listened to him. Where am I? Senate Democrat from Rhode Island, Jack Reed, the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, accusing Trump of gambling with America's security. Senator Reed, one of the few Democrats to openly oppose Israel's bombing of Iran last week, said of Trump's airstrikes, quote, it's easier to start wars than end them. That should be chiseled into the forehead of every United States member of Congress. It's easier to start wars than end them. It should be, instead of e pluribus unum or in God we trust, that's what it should say on our currency. And again, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, who already introduced a war powers resolution last week to rein in Trump's authority to launch an airstrike in Iran, he called Trump's decision Saturday horrible judgment. Kaine said American people are overwhelmingly opposed to the U.S. waging war on Iran, unquote. Tim Kaine called the strike unconstitutional and an offensive war of choice by a president without consultation of Congress. So, I got to wrap it up. Trump is obviously the bad guy. But once again, Democrats create conditions for authoritarian fascists like Donald Trump to thrive. You had Tim Kaine last week, Democrat from Virginia, Hillary's running mate in 2016. You had Ro Khanna, California Democrat in the House. You had Kentucky Republican Thomas Massie invoking the War Powers Resolution, which was passed in the aftermath of Vietnam to avoid another Vietnam. And one of the provisions of the War Powers Act is you can stop a president from bombing another country before he does it. Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries had these bills that they could have brought before Congress. Yes, there's no question that John Thune, Majority Leader, and Mike Johnson, the Speaker, would have rejected it. But then you go on record being against the airstrikes, and you put the Republicans, you make them own those airstrikes. I hate beating up on the Democrats. I really do. Because Trump is horrible. But the fecklessness of the ruling class, multimillionaires controlling the Democratic Party, has to end. Bernie said we need to clean house last week, that we have to start getting rid of people in the Democratic Party who answer to billionaires. I say go one step further, get rid of the millionaires. If you're a millionaire or a billionaire, you can vote for Democrats, but you're not allowed inside the leadership. There needs to be a dialectic. One party has to represent the 1%, and another party has to represent the 99%. Otherwise, we're going to be, you know where we're going to be. Thank you for listening to me. Please share this episode with your friends. Please hit the like button so I remain in your feed. It's harder to find this show. It's been throttled back a little for obvious reasons. Thank you to Bob and Mila. I don't know if they're in the chat room. Please subscribe to this channel, please, and subscribe to my newsletter. And thank you for listening to me. I shouldn't be upset the way I am. But I don't get angry at Trump so much as I get angry at the Democrats. It's why, and a little personal relationship advice. We tend to fight with our loved ones more than we do others. We get angrier at our loved ones because we expect more from them. But Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are not my loved ones. Rashida Tlaib, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Cori Bush when she was in Congress. Those are my loved ones. Get out there and protest, please. Protest, please. Somebody threw a water bottle at a close friend of mine yesterday or Friday during a protest. But protest. Thank you.